The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to a brand new edition of the Lifted Embargo, the movie review podcast that, well, it reviews movies. We review the latest films that are coming to your local neighborhood theaters this coming weekend. And every single week, what we like to do is bring in a brand new critic to offer a fresh perspective and opinion to go along with mine, your host, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at joblo.com as well as thisisinfamous.com. This week, one film on the docket we're going to talk about, and I really dug deep down into the internet film blogosphere for my guest this week. He is a sort of a horror guru of sorts, which sort of fits into the film that we're going to talk about this week. So you can find his work, his writing at Nerdist, at Thrillist, at Playboy, and of course on Twitter at Scott Weinberg. He's also the producer of the upcoming horror film Found Footage 3D, which you can find in theaters at some point in time. Keep an eye out for it. Yeah. So Scott Weinberg joins me this week. Scott, thank you very much. This is such a pleasure to have you on the show this week.
Thank you, man. Thank you for the invite. Always happy to join in another podcast. I'm trying to start up a new podcast with our mutual friend, Drew McWeeny, and I'm trying to, so it's always fun to be on other people's podcasts to hear how they do it and take some mental tips from experienced people. Because I've done a lot of podcasts for other people, but I haven't really done one for myself. So it's always fun and helpful to be a guest on a new podcast.
Oh, Drew McWeeny. One day I'm going to get him. He's an elusive white whale right now to try and get him.
He's a tough guy to pin down. He's the daddy of two young boys.
Yes.
He writes nonstop. He just moved into a new place. But he's also one of the nicest guys in the world. I will put a bug in his ear and say, when you get a free hour, sit down with Billy.
Excellent. I appreciate it. One day it will happen.
Yep.
But in the meantime, this is happening between you and I. We've talked in the past before. I always am a big fan of your writing and your work. So I'm glad that I was able to reel you in here.
I'm a fan of yours as well. You're a good writer.
Thank you very much. So maybe we were to reel you in here on this particular show to talk about the one film we're going to talk about this week, which is Don't Breathe. Before we do get into that, though, I want to sort of give you the floor, the platform to sort of lay out your credentials, let everybody know where you've been, how you got to this point, how you started with film writing and film criticism, and how you ended up to where you are right now, the highly esteemed horror expert of sorts that I went out of my way to get here.
Yeah, I've always said that if I can be considered a horror expert, then that makes me happy, because there will never be the horror expert. No. You and I both know more than our fair share about horror history, and there's something weird about our little niche of the fandom, is that we all want to kind of prove, if there's a horror trivia game, we all want to do it. Every Sam Zimmerman and Brian Collins and you and me and John Squires and all these good people want to. The Blumhouse crew, everybody would want to play, and I'd be like, oh God, what if I do terribly? But I'm just thrilled to be considered. I've spent my whole life surrounded by movies, especially horror movies. So that people slightly younger than me consider me an authority or reliable voice on horror. That is very flattering. It means a lot to me. Like I said, there are dozens of people out there who know who would put me to shame. But I don't want to mention them because that's embarrassing.
Yeah, well, there's always somebody who knows more. No matter how much we think we know.
And you grow up when you realize I don't have to be the number one expert. I can contribute. I got my own expertise. You're never going to be, on the other hand, though, as a film writer, you never want to get complacent and say, oh, I'm good enough at this. You always want to try and improve your craft. And, if you start reading a writer who's, got a good tone or a good style, you'd be like, oh, they're loose and funny, or I like that structure, or I like that turn of phrase. You can always get better. You can always improve your acumen with readers. Movie geeks are smart, and you don't want to insult their intelligence. But I've been writing online. I've been writing online for over 15 years. I started at a site, a non-paying but excellent site called eFilm Critic, which has been a springboard for many good film critics, in my opinion. And from there, I moved on to, I got some paid work at Rotten Tomatoes and the late, great Cinematical. And then all throughout, I would do little, smaller work here for DVD Talk, even Mr. Skin. I did some work for some writing for them. Nice guys over at Mr. Skin. And then I moved over to FearNet, and I became their featured film critic. Not the only guy, but pretty much virtually everything that came out, I was fortunate enough to be the guy who reviewed it. And that was a great feeling to be like, the film critic at a website as opposed to one of 8. And there's certainly nothing wrong with writing with a big group, but for a while FearNet was like I was the film critic there, and that felt nice. And then unfortunately, as we know, FearNet vanished because Comcast kind of keelhauled it and killed it. And then since then I've been doing some work for Nerdist, great people there, and Thrillist, no relation, even though they both end in IST. And also a great site. And I've been doing some features for Playboy. And it's been just a long, slow process. I've been covering festivals for all those years. And it's just, I love what I do. As we both know, the money sure ain't great.
No.
But I enjoy talking about film. I enjoy writing about film. I've done some audio commentaries. I'm like a lot of us, I'm just grateful that I can be knee deep in something that I love. For some people it's sports, some people it's cars, but for me it's movies, and all movies, of course, but in particular horror. I love horror.
Well said. And so just before we do get into Don't Breathe, for the record, there are 2 other major releases that are hitting the theaters this weekend as well that we will not be talking about this week. One is Hands of Stone, which is the Roberto Duran biopic. That also stars Robert De Niro. So if you want to go out and find reviews of that, there are a wealth of those, I'm sure, out there on the internet. You can read up on those or listen to other podcasts that may feature those. It's just not going to be on this show. And the other would be the Mechanic Resurrection, the sequel to the Jason Statham Mechanic remake. That film was not screened for critics, so you may not find a lot of reviews out there for your liking if you're trying to inform yourself on that film. But it is Jason Statham beating the shit out of more people. So if that's your if that's your cup of tea, I got a feeling you're not.
On one hand, it irks guys like me and you when we, they're not screening it for the press. And then you think, I can't do my job. And hey, critics can appreciate a B action movie. And then when it comes to movies like this, and then we see them 3 months later, we're like, yeah, good call. Good call to not screen it.
You know what though? I have no shame in saying that I will watch a Jason Statham movie any day of the week.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love the guy. He's done his fair share of bad movies, but I love the guy.
Yeah, I don't even
think he's
care.
Got a cool presence. He's a good action star. He's got a good attitude. Yeah, I dig Statham, and it just makes you wonder, like, everybody knows that something like Mechanic 2 is just going to be a mindless action flick. Everybody knows that. So why treat it like a dirty secret? Why does it matter? It's like we all know it's just a basic action programmer. Who cares?
I mean,
but on the other hand, scheduling press screenings actually costs money. So, maybe their logic is we don't need reviews. Statham fans are going to come and other people aren't. And that's that.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, a Statham movie, they all follow the same formula, which is like somebody fucks with Jason Statham, his house, his family, his dog, him, his car, whatever. Yep. He gets pissed off about it. And then he goes and beats the shit out of people in revenge. They're all the same.
Yeah, what I like about Statham is that not all, but most of his movies play as simply as the fun 80s action movies that we had back then.
Yeah.
Like, just basic Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris, completely simplistic stories, but for the most part, entertaining action movies. Yes. And Statham kind of reminds me of the 80s action template, and I like that.
Well, he's the only guy who's doing it. So, look, we haven't seen the film, but Mechanic is out there. So if you want to go see it as a Statham fan, by all means, I will recommend it blindly for you to go see it if you dig Statham.
And as a horror fan, I find it very interesting that it was directed by a guy who several years ago directed a very cool vampire movie called We Are the Night, which if you see it, make sure you see the actual version, not the dubbed version, because the dubbed version is terrible. So whether or not Mechanic 2 is any good, go dig up We Are the Night. That's a good one.
Well, there you go. See, once again, bringing in some horror expertise to the discussion.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the one film that we are going to discuss here on the show, and that is Don't Breathe. Don't Breathe is directed by Fede Alvarez, stars Jane Levy, Dylan Minnette, Daniel Zavato, and Stephen Lang, and is sort of simplistic in its premise. Basically, a trio of burglars, probably about 20-something as far as age is concerned, burglars who get a tip that there is a blind man in a deserted part of town who's housing about $300,000 in his house. They decide that this is going to be their next and last gig as they are trying to rally together some money in order to split Detroit and head out to the sunny shores of California in favor of a better life. But once they get into this house, they realize that they may be in over their head, and it's up to them to try to escape this domicile with both the money they came for as well as their lives. That's about as baseline a premise as we could get for Don't Breathe. As we do get into it right now, we're going to issue sort of a spoiler warning, a blanket spoiler warning, as we will get our hands dirty on this film in a number of ways. So if you haven't seen it yet, this may be your time to pause and go and check it out and come right back to us. But if you have, then you know where we're going anyway. So just for the record, for those people who get a little too sensitive about it, spoiler warning from here on out.
I do.
Yeah. So,
I am an old crotchety man, and I will anything that would like lessen somebody's enjoyment of the movie. Like there are things that we wouldn't consider spoilers that I wouldn't mention because it's like, oh, it's an interesting character beat or it's an interesting little subplot. And it might not be integral to the movie, but I don't want my readers to be robbed of that cool little experience. And that's why I try to be very, and I think you do as well. I try to be very vague in my plot synopses when I write a review. I try to make the story sound as interesting as I can in like 3 sentences. And this is a good movie for that. It's refreshingly simple is what I like about it. Is that some horror films are simple because the screenplay doesn't have many ideas. Some are simple by design because that's the efficiency that they want. And I think Don't Breathe is a remarkably efficient, crisp, fast-paced. I mean, I think it runs, what does it run? 88 minutes?
Yeah, it's
82 minutes?
It's 88 minutes. Like it's really tightly wound.
Yeah. And what I like, and I reviewed it for Nerdist, and what I liked most about the movie and mentioned in my review is that it's kind of it flips the script on home invasion, whereas most of the home invasion movies that you and I love, Your Next, The Strangers, Them, you name a couple now.
Well, I mean, even something as recent as Hush still falls along the same lines.
Yes, Hush is I also mentioned, and something as classic as Wait Until Dark. But what's interesting here is that whereas most home invasion movies are bad guys trying to invade and hurt good people on the inside, what's fun here is that you're slightly bad people who break in and come across a guy who is crazily evil. So it's like, they're thieves and they're obnoxious in their ways, but of the 3 characters, at least 2 of them are very well written so that you get to almost, at first you're like, well, you get what you deserve because you broke in. And then like halfway through the movie, you're like, no, I don't deserve it. I want them to escape, damn it. That's the screenplay.
I mean, look, I'll agree with you on that point. Like the thing that I really dug about this film is that it deals a lot in sort of the shades of gray. Like there's no one who's really like purely good. There's nobody who's purely heroic. And at the same time, for the most part, there's not someone I think who's purely the bad guy. I
think Stephen Lang plays a pure bad guy, but to the film's credit, it gives you logical, relatable reason as to why he's so evil. He's not just Jason. He's an evil, malicious person, but at least they gave him some backstory to explain it. And that's what makes it more interesting.
Yeah. Everybody's actually
and how great is Stephen Lang in this movie?
I mean, what's really incredible too is that, a lot of the film doesn't operate using dialogue to express anything.
Nope. There's a lot of silent stretches, and they're all good.
Yes, and all it does is it keeps you on the hook to just That's where I find it great that like the title's not really a suggestion. Like it's legitimate because you have these long stretches of silence, as you mentioned, where you find yourself sort of holding your breath and remaining silent because the film is able to sort of
the film really pulls you into she's standing in the hallway and the evil blind man is walking past her, and the director he sets it up so that it's not an overly long sequence, but it's just as long as it needs to be for you to be like, oh my god. Like, the suspense builds and builds and builds throughout the movie. And then for horror fans, there's some nice gory moments. There's a couple of you can spoil them if you want, but I don't want to. There's a subplot involving the killer's motivations that leads to some twisted psychosexual behavior. Let's leave it at that, Billy.
Yeah.
And it is we're like just when a horror movie is about like an hour and 5 minutes in, that's when you're just getting a little bit like, all right, wrap it up. And that's exactly when they introduce this new motivation, this new subplot to a point, and you're like, it buoys the film for the remaining 20 minutes. So yeah, I think it's a great horror film. I think it's it finds a way to get some new energy into a potentially tired premise. And it reminds me of some really good indie horror films I've seen over the last couple of years, and it also has its own unique stamp. But didn't it remind you a little bit of The Collector?
A little bit. I mean, look, the thing that works, I think, so well here is that you have these burglars who they're not bad people. Like, this is just what they do. You know, like that's...
one of them is. Two of them are not.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean one
of them's a rotten asshole.
I mean, one of them is so broadly drawn as just a douche that it makes the others seem totally normal by comparison.
I think that's I think that's part of the screenwriting cleverness there, is that in order for us to like be able to empathize with criminals, they got to give them degrees. One of them is a rotten guy. The other is a girl who's into it but has her reasons. And the other is kind of a reluctant little, kind of a sensitive person guy. and that's what allows us to relate with the two other characters later on, I think.
Yeah, and by that same point, like until you sort of get into the subplot with Stephen Lang later in the film, for me, because the film does justify the actions, you look at this guy and you go, well, he's a blind guy in his house. He's got intruders. He's defending his property. And you can once again see that on that level and go, well, who's really the bad guys in this movie? Once again, there's no one that's purely heroic. Lots of shades of gray. Almost you're dealing with sort of anti-heroes on one end. And then on the other, you're trying to figure out what's going on with this house, because with what Alvarez does, especially in the beginning, and I'm sure you picked up on it too, is like he sets his rules really clearly early on. He gives us a sort of a layout of the house. He takes us on a tour of the house early on.
And the house is darkly beautiful. Yes. Really good production design. A real claustrophobic. You hear, the house is almost its own character, but it really is, because it's not just like an empty husk that's dark. It's a room. I mean, it's a series of rooms with personality. It's a creepy house.
Yeah, but he also sets everything up. So he sets it up so that you sort of have an idea of where everything is and your own connection to how the house works. So when he shows you, like a hammer, or he shows you a particular window, or he shows you this doorway,
little foreshadowing bits. Yeah.
He sets all of these things up for you, and they all pay off, and they pay off very well, to the point where they're so subtle that you forget about them, but when they reappear, you go, "Oh yeah, that thing."
Yeah.
So I think
when they're done right, a little callback or two can be very satisfying.
Yeah, and I think as a result, like the film's just really well constructed. Like it's simple, but it's really tight in the way it operates.
Yeah, and what I like it's like they're not apologizing for how simple it is. It's simple by design.
Yes,
it's not simple because they ran out of ideas but still had a cool house. It's simple because like Hush. It's simple because it's constructed to be simple.
Yes,
and within that simple framework, there's some really clever filmmaking in this movie. Like, to be fair, I think Hush and Don't Breathe would make for a really good double feature, because Hush is kind of a traditional home invasion story about a very resourceful deaf woman who is invaded by an evil man. So it's pretty much a straightforward home invasion template, whereas this one flips the script, and the deaf versus blind angle might make for some interesting comparisons. And they're both great thrillers. So, for my money, two of the best horror movies of the year, frankly.
Yeah, I would totally stack those two films up. Now that I think about it, they would totally be great as far as putting them up because they present something similar, but they're also very, very different in a number of ways.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of the sensory deprivation in a number of ways too, because with Hush,
absolutely.
Yeah, with Hush, you're taking away the sound in a number of places in order to sort of get you in the head of this woman who's sort of being victimized in that film. And here on the flip side, there's this great sequence of where he makes everybody blind with him. He turns the lights out, and you can't see. I mean, you can see because they'll show you it, but there's also limited visibility in what it is that you can see. So, it's one of those horror situations where the film is informing you as the viewer, and you are frightened for the people on screen because you have slightly more information than they do.
Yes.
So I think
you don't have a ton more. You're a few beats ahead of the characters.
Yes.
You're not, because if you're way ahead of the characters, you're going to lose interest. But if you're just a few beats, like, oh my God, lock that door, right before the character thinks of it, that's good filmmaking. That's good editing. That's good direction. And I think that Don't Breathe and Hush, while they could be described as narratively simple, are both very clever films. And so I hope Don't Breathe has a nice opening weekend, because it represents, it is an original horror film. It is made by a guy who's known for Before Evil Dead. He did a lot of good shorts. He's done the festival circuit, so he's an indie guy. And, it's always great when you can see somebody who cut their teeth on indie films and shorts, and they can break out and translate their indie sensibility with a budget and please the studio and please the audience. I think Fede Alvarez, if he stays in horror, has a long list of quality films ahead of him. He's clearly got a gift for tapping into what scares people.
All right, let me talk about the subplot because what I found most interesting about this, and I saw it in a screening with a lot of people in there too, so it wasn't just press, it was also the general public. So I had some people behind me that I was also able to sort of eavesdrop on as the sort of the moment arises in the film. And it's a real ride or die kind of situation, I think, in the film. There's a point here where I think deep into the film, you either just say, fuck it, I've come this far, I'm going with you wherever it is that you want to take me. And it does go to some wacky places.
Yeah,
it is twisted.
And not in a silly way, but in a complete dark left turn.
Yes. So there's that aspect, or there's the not too far. Like, you just throw your hands up and you're too far and you go, I can't, and you sort of check out at that point. For me, I rode with it. The whole way. Yeah. I was like, I'm in.
Oh no! By that point, it's like a movie is like, it's like a friendship. It's like, if you and I are friends for a week, maybe I don't trust you that much. But if we've been friends for years, I trust you completely. And this movie, by hour one, he could have done anything, and I would have trusted him. He could have been like, the house is a spaceship, and I'd have been like, okay. You know what I mean? The movie is so entertaining for the first 45 minutes that when it turns on a dime and introduces this odd subplot and sexual behavior from our antagonist, I was fine with it. I was like, oh, that's a cool contortion. I didn't expect that. I thought it was just going to be him chasing them for 90 minutes. And they bring in some fun stuff.
Yeah, I totally
not
didn't
for the
expect
kid.
it.
Not for kid. Not for the kid.
No, it's rather graphic. There are some shots there that kind of leave you cringing a little bit, even when you're riding with it. You're like, all right.
Yeah.
So he's going there, and to Alvarez's credit, he does not sort of half-ass it. He goes full blown.
No, and there's a scene that we're talking about, which you could capably describe as attempted rape.
Yeah,
and it's done like it's a really kind of twisted method of attempted rape, and as twisted as the concept is, Alvarez still shoots it with some restraint and some class, so that it's disturbing, but it's not like, oh, dude, like why, there's a fine line between, legitimately entertaining and shocking, and then gross. You went too far.
Yeah,
it's not gross.
I mean, it is. It's not gross. There's a couple of shots that I'll show you that you're just like, all right, we're going here. Okay, all right, we're going here. And I'm fine. Like, I was fine with it. I was fine with it. I think that the film earns it. The film earns the ability to go in this sort of truly bizarre, dark twisted corner of the world that it wants to go into. And then it doesn't linger on that ugly stuff too long, and that's right before it ramps up into a third act that is just fantastic. Yeah.
The last 20 minutes of this movie are fantastic. Like grab the person next to you, kick your feet on the floor, you squeal under your breath, all that stuff. It's cut like a dream. The whole movie is good, but Act 3 is particularly entertaining.
Let's talk about Jane Levy for a little bit too, because I think, after Evil Dead, she sort of not went away for a while, but sort of moved into doing her own thing. Didn't really linger in horror too much after that. But between that film and this, that film also directed by Fede Alvarez, this girl takes a beating. And she is a trooper when it comes to horror films.
Not only is she a damn good actor, she is a very good actor. But the physical in Evil Dead, and she's probably asked to do double the physical punishment in this film that she was in Evil Dead. And that was, it's just amazing. She's probably 90 pounds soaking wet. She's a small, diminutive little woman, and she has a powerful screen presence, but physically she's pretty small. And she goes through so much physical, not actual torture, but so much on-set torture. I can only imagine that after every day, she was just a collection of bruises.
Yeah. And she's fierce. Like that's the thing about this character is we talk about this all the time, like the quote unquote strong female character, and what exactly that means, and whether it's the physicality of it, whether it's just good character arcs and building sort of well-rounded. characters.
I think she's good on all fronts here.
Yeah.
She has her own agency. She is an unhappy but proactive woman who, she has two male counterparts. And, I'd obviously leave this up to a female woman or a female film critic to delve into deeper, because they'd probably have a better insight. But I think she's one of the strongest and most interesting heroines in horror in quite some time. I think that her performance prevents the movie from ever becoming ridiculous. A movie like this, as good as it is, risks becoming ridiculous constantly. It really does. And without her and Lang, I don't think it'd be quite as good, frankly.
No, I don't know if it would, because she grounds it, but she's also a badass. And at the same time, she's able to bring vulnerability to that character that it's not always a foregone conclusion that she's going to make it out of this film. It's not a foregone conclusion that anybody's going to make it out of this film. That's the fun part of it, of them setting it with three initially criminal people, which is, on one hand, in a traditional horror movie, you might be like, oh, there's three characters and they're all pretty nice. So I assume one of them is going to survive because they're all nice, That's the moral, But in this movie, they're not like, terrible people, but they're crooks. They're criminals, so all bets are off, like if they end up suffering a horrible demise, maybe they deserved it. Maybe that's up to you, right? Yeah. Maybe the moral lesson is don't break and enter into people's homes. Maybe.
Yeah. Doubly so if it's a raving maniac.
Yeah, when you break into the home of a retired army vet who's sort of a loner, there's a reason this guy lives all by himself in the deserted part of town.
Yeah, and the film also does offer the interesting subtext of, just because you think somebody's helpless, guess what? That doesn't mean they are.
Yeah.
Like you could take it on any level of any. It could be any character. It doesn't have to be this lonely blind lunatic. It could be anybody. Like somebody you think is a sure victim. There's a good chance they're not.
Yeah. Overall, I really love this movie.
Yeah, I adore it. I think the more I think about it, the more I like it, and that's always a nice feeling.
Yeah, the more I talk about it, like it just makes me feel good, sort of talking about it. Which for a horror film that just is dealing with like 4 unsavory individuals, is refreshing, I guess, in a number of ways. But this to me, I think, is one of those films that I could easily go back right now and watch it again. I would take somebody else to go see it. Like if somebody
I will definitely see it again this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know when, but I'm going to drag my friends, my buddy who likes horror movies, doesn't love them, and his girlfriend who just doesn't. But if I say it's really good, they'll trust me, and they're gonna squirm their asses off. They're gonna love it.
Yeah, this is one of those films that like you just want to usher other people into it. They go, "Oh, I'm thinking about going to see a movie," and you're like, "I will take an hour and a half out of my day to champion this film for you. Let's go."
And what's fun is that, guys like me and you, when we see something a little bit early, you're like, "Oh, I really liked blank." And then you kind of you think, "Oh, well, when people see it, I hope they agree." When I spent the last few days tweeting about this movie, I'm like, I didn't wonder if people will agree. I know that they're going to agree. Like, I will probably get 8 or 10 tweets tonight from people saying, "Dude, you were right. Holy shit."
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fun. It's exciting. It is thrilling. This is an adrenaline pumper. You will get enjoyment out of watching this, and even if you choose to die at the ride or die moment, I think you will have gotten enough out of the first end of the film to at least say,
I think that might be one of those. I think it might be one of those way Homer nitpicks where people like because when you're in the movie, there's no way you're going to nitpick any of these new plot developments. But maybe on the way home, you'd be like, "Wait a minute, why did?"
Yeah.
But when you're watching the movie, no way. It will have you in its grip for 80 minutes without question.
Yeah, submit to Don't Breathe. Basically that give yourself over completely to the film from beginning to end, and I think that you are in for a fun ride. A wild, strange ride, but a fun one nonetheless. So to recap for the both of us, Don't Breathe, highly recommended. One that you should absolutely go out of your way to see. And I mean, I've seen some horror this summer. This I would put right up there in the upper echelon as far as what I've seen.
Oh, absolutely. I would put. I mean, I hate to just do it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's up there with The Conjuring 2 and Hush, and maybe not as quite as impressive as The Witch. But if I'm making a top 10 horror movies of the year, Don't Breathe is on that list without question.
It's different. It owns its own. It's its own thing, So it's hard to say. Well, to compare it to other horror films. I mean, like The Conjuring or something completely different.
A lot of times horror is just apples and oranges. You wouldn't compare this to The Witch. They couldn't be more differently. Yeah. They couldn't be more different. But they are still both horror movies, and we love to make our year-end list.
Yeah.
But and it's a good shorthand. I see you and I see virtually every horror movie of the year. So if you were to say to somebody, this is one of the top 10, that's just shorthand. It's that's for saying see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just see it.
Absolutely, Don't Breathe. See it. From the both of us. See it. Just go see it.
Yes.
And then go watch Jason Statham beat the shit out of people.
Right, and then go watch the found footage 3D trailer.
Way to make sure you got that plug in there.
Shoot.
Scott,
I'm shameless.
I have no problem with shamelessness. Be as shameless as you need.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to give you the opportunity for you to be shameless right now. Scott, before I let you go, let everybody know out there where it is they could find you on the interwebs and now upcoming in cinemas everywhere too.
Oh, thank you. Well, Found Footage 3D is a film made by a very cool friend of mine named Steven DeGennaro. He wrote it, he directed it, produced it, edited it, he did everything, sound design. And he hired me as a producer a couple of years ago. I also play myself in the film very briefly. And it's like a meta horror film about a bunch of dummies who go into the woods to make a found footage horror film, even though they have no idea how to make a film, but they assume it's simple because it's found footage, right? We had a really good world premiere at Groovy Fest in Chicago. On Monday, it's playing in Fright Fest in London. And we've gotten some nice reviews so far. And we're just getting started showing the film in public places. If things continue the way they are now, we'll be elated. We're really happy with the response that we got so far. And when the film is available for the general public, I will be sure to let you know on Twitter, Scott E. Weinberg.
That's right. Also, Nerdist, Thrillist, Playboy, he's out there. And also, as you mentioned, always crusading on Twitter. So make sure you follow him there. Scott, an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time to come here on the show, man. So
happy to talk about this movie. Always happy to talk because I love to hear my own voice, and particularly happy to pimp this movie. It's really good, and I hope your listeners really dig the movie.
Scott Weinberg, everybody. Be sure to follow all our social media accounts as well. Hit us up on Twitter at TisInfamous. That's TIS Infamous. For our mothership, this is Infamous, the home of the Lifted Embargo podcast. So on Twitter, you'll be able to be notified anytime a brand new piece of content goes up. So follow us there on Twitter at TisInfamous. And myself at Infamous Kid for all my random ramblings and musings. My stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less at Infamous Kid, KIDD. Over on Facebook, 2 pages to like, facebook.com/TisInfamous, facebook.com/BullyTheKid. Always good content going up there as well. Really interesting discussion threads for you to take part in participate. So just like those 2 pages and get involved over on the Facebook part of your social media. You can also find the podcast basically everywhere podcasts can be found. iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Blueberry, SoundCloud, you name it, you can find the Lifted Embargo. So all we do is we ask for you to subscribe so that every brand new show is delivered to your mobile device or tablet. And you also rate and you comment. So let us know what a good job we're doing. Help for placement of the show on those various distribution models. So just a couple seconds of your time and we'll be golden. And I will greatly appreciate your efforts. You can also find my work on a regular basis. JoeBlow.com, thisisinfamous.com. Always excellent content for you to read, watch, and of course, listen to, so be sure to check it out. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been The Lifted Embargo. Hopefully you go out there this weekend and you find something good to watch. There's always something out there if you look hard enough. It just so happens this week, it's going to be Don't Breathe. So have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. I'm out for now. Peace. The Lifted Embargo is a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.